guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how you can use SSH to connect to your GitHub remote repository. Now, normally when you have to make any commits to your repository, GitHub is going to spin up an instance of your default browser where you'll have a dialog where you'll enter your credentials, and then once those credentials have been authenticated, you'll be authorized to make any commits to the specific repository that you're interfacing with. Now, the problem with that is that you'll have to get out of your development environment, move to the browser before you can get back to your development environment and continue with your commits. Okay, now what SSH does, it eliminates the interruption from your development environment, okay, so that you as a developer can work exclusively from the terminal. Now let's see how we can use SSH to actually connect to a GitHub repository. But first, what is SSH? SSH is a protocol that uses public key cryptography to link hosts and users. Now, SSH provides us with the SSH Keygen tool, which allows us to generate public and private keys using specific algorithms that we're going to look at, with which we can then use to establish a secure communication between us, the user, and whatever host we are communicating with. Now, SSH provides us with 4 algorithms that we can use to actually generate these private and public key pairs. Okay, so these algorithms are RSA, DSA, ECDSA, and EC25519. Each algorithm has a set of key size options with which you can use to generate the private and public key pairs. Okay, so for example, for RSA, you can generate keys of sizes 2048 or 4096 bytes. For DSA, you can generate a key size of 1024, and for ECDSA, you can generate a key size of 256, 384, or 521. Now, the larger the byte size, the more secure your public and private key pairs are going to be. So I would always suggest using a larger key size value. Okay. Now that we have looked at the types of algorithms we can use to generate the keys, let us look at the command that we can use to actually generate these keys. Now, to generate these keys, we use the SSH Keygen command, followed by a type. Okay, now the type, we've seen that the type can either be RSA, DSA, ECDSA, or EC25519. Now for the byte size, we have seen that each algorithm has a corresponding key size. So for example, for RSA, the byte size can either be 2048 or 4096. For ECDSA, the byte size can either be 256, 384, or 521. Now, after specifying the options for whichever algorithm you're going to use, SSH Keygen is going to generate a public and private key pair. But now, if you're supposed to interface with GitHub, the command is a little bit different. Apart from using SSH Keygen, the type, the bytes, we're also going to include the C option, okay, where you're going to pass in quotes the email address that you use to register for a GitHub account. Now let's see exactly how we can generate a key, a private public key pair, and how we can use these keys to establish a secure connection with our GitHub repository. Now to do that, we are going to open a new terminal. If you're on Windows, I would suggest that you use PowerShell, okay? And then in our terminal, we're going to type in the SSH Keygen command. So we'll say SSH Keygen. And then for the type, I'm going to be using ECDSA for this one, but the same applies for the rest of the algorithms, that is RSA, DSA, EC25519. Okay, so I will say ECDSA, and then for the byte size, like I said, use the largest byte size. So in this case, 521 for a more secure public private key pair. And then because we want to generate a key specific to a GitHub repository, we will include the C command. And in quotes, I'm going to pass in the email address that I used to open a GitHub account. So I will say, so do the same, pass in the email that you use to open a GitHub account in quotation marks, and then I'll press enter. Now, when you press enter, SSH Keygen will want to store the public private key pair in a location. Now, I'll suggest storing the private public key pair in the default location. So press enter. And then because I had already created a public private key pair, I'm just going to override that. But for you, you're not going to be asked to override that. And then for you, you'll be asked to enter the passphrase. So I would suggest using a word or a phrase that you can easily remember. So when you have that phrase or word that you can easily remember, pass it as a value, then confirm it. And then once you've confirmed it, SSH is going to generate a public and private key pair. Now let us look at these keys that SSH has generated for us. So to do that, I'm going to cd to .ssh. .ssh means that it is a hidden folder. And then when I list the contents of .ssh, we'll see that we have id ecdsa and id ecdsa.pub. Okay, for those who haven't yet used SSH, you won't have the non-host and non-host.old files. Okay, that shows that SSH has successfully generated the public and private key pairs for us. Now what you're going to do, you're going to open the public key, and then we're going to copy that public key to GitHub. So say cat id ecdsa.pub, okay? And then I want you to copy the contents in the public key. And then once you've copied that, I want you to head out to your GitHub repository. So I'll head out to my GitHub repository, do the same. And then in your GitHub repository, I want you to go to your profile and then go to settings. And then under settings, I want you to select SSH and GPG keys option, okay? And then once you have clicked that, you will have a button on the far end asking you to add a new SSH key. So click on that and then give it a name. So for this, I will just say git toots, give it whatever name you want. And then the contents that we copied from the public key, we are going to paste it in this text box. So paste it in. And then once you have pasted in, add it as a new SSH, okay? And then in case you're going to be asked to confirm access, for me, I'm going to use my password, so enter your password. And then once you have confirmed access, GitHub is going to include the SSH as part of the SSH keys that we have. Now that we have successfully added the new SSH to GitHub, let us see how we can actually use this key. To do that, I'm going to open a new terminal, and in this terminal, I'm going to cd to desktop, okay? And then inside the desktop, I'm going to make a new directory. I'm going to call it git SSH. You can call it whatever. And then we're going to cd to git SSH. And then once we're there, we're going to open code within git SSH, like that, like that. And then inside the VS Code, what we're going to do, we're going to create a new file. I'm going to name it main.py. I'm also going to open a new terminal, and then in the terminal, I'm going to initialize a new GitHub repository. And then once we have initialized the new GitHub repository, we are going to go back to our GitHub account, and then we are going to create a new repository, okay? So the remote repository that we want to link to our local repository. So in here, I'm going to create a new repository. I'm going to call it SSH Keys. Right? And then I'm just going to leave everything as is, and then I'm going to create that new repository. And then once we've created that new repository, we have the HTTPS URL and the SSH URI. So I want you to copy the SSH URI, okay? Once you've copied it, navigate back to the terminal that we just opened in VS Code, and then we're going to pass in a command git remote, and then add, let's give it a name, git keys, and then pass the URI, and then paste the URI, and then press enter. Once you do that, Git is going to link the remote repository with this local repository we've just initialized. And then inside that, I'm going to now to try to commit main.py to the remote repository. To do that, I'll say git add all, because after all, we only have main.py in it. And then after that, I'm going to commit, git commit with a message. I'm going to just say how to use SSH keys. You can pass in whatever message you want, but this is just for demonstration purposes, right? And then once we have committed, we have made that commit, we're going to use the git push command. So we'll say git push and then u, okay, from git keys, the name that we just, the name of the remote repository, and then master, that is the default name of the local repository, okay? And then press enter. And then once you press enter, a dialog is going to be spawned up where we're going to enter the passphrase that we use to create the public and private key pairs. So pass in the use and then press enter. And then once that passphrase goes through, you will have successfully linked your remote repository to your local repository. That way you don't have to leave the terminal, or you don't have to leave a development environment. So I believe this is a better option as compared to the one an instance of your default browser is spanned up and then you have to enter your password. So I hope you've learned something today. If you did, give this video a like. Let me know what your opinions are in the comment section below, and then I'll see you in the next. Peace.